I didn't realize I had become my mother's retirement plan until she handed me her electricity bill and said, "You're paying this now." At first, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. That was the beginning of what I now call my revenge story, but back then it felt like survival. I grew up in a small town outside Seattle, single mom household, tight money, constant stress. My mom liked to remind me how much she sacrificed. How many nights did I skip dinner so you could eat? How many jobs did I work so you could have shoes? As a kid, that kind of narrative sinks into your bones. You grow up believing you owe someone your entire existence. When I got my first job at 19, she hugged me like I'd won the lottery. But by 24, after I landed a stable marketing position in the city, something shifted. The comments started casually. "You make good money now. You know how hard things are for me. Family takes care of family." At first, it sounded reasonable, loving even. But then came the bank transfers. It started small, $200 for groceries, then $500 for unexpected repairs, then her phone bill, then her car insurance. Every time I hesitated, she'd sigh dramatically. "I guess I just thought I could count on my daughter." That's how parent pressure works. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It wraps itself in guilt. By 26, I was covering almost all her living expenses: rent, utilities, subscriptions, credit card minimums. She framed it as temporary forced financial support, just until I get back on my feet. But her feet never seemed to move. I lived in a tiny apartment with peeling paint while she upgraded her couch. I skipped vacations while she posted spa day selfies on Facebook. And when I gently asked if she was looking for more work, she snapped, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me?" That sentence hit like a slap, because it made me question myself. Was I selfish? Ungrateful? A bad daughter? I told myself this was normal, that supporting your parent was just part of adulthood. But something felt off. The numbers in my bank account didn't lie. Neither did the knot in my stomach every time she called. One night, after wiring her $1,200 for emergency taxes, I opened my budgeting app and realized I had $83 left until payday. $83. And she had just posted photos from a weekend wine tasting trip. That was the moment the word forced financial support stopped feeling temporary. It felt like a trap. I started replaying every conversation in my head, every sigh, every guilt trip, every subtle manipulation. This wasn't just help, this was expectation, and expectations, when built on parent pressure, become chains. I still loved her. That's the worst part. But deep down, a quiet thought began forming, one I was ashamed to admit. What if I wasn't the selfish one? What if this wasn't about family, but control? And that's when I started paying attention. Because every revenge story begins with a realization. Mine began with a bill I never agreed to pay, and a mother who believed I always would. Once I started paying attention, I couldn't unsee it. The pattern was too clean. Every crisis arrived right after I got paid. Every emergency required an immediate transfer. If I hesitated, the tone shifted. "You've changed. Money really went to your head. I guess I'm just a burden now." That word, burden, was calculated, because suddenly I wasn't just refusing forced financial support, I was abandoning my own mother. The first time I said, "I need to slow down on sending money," she went silent. Not angry, not yelling, silent. Then she texted me 3 hours later, "I didn't raise you to be selfish." That's how parent pressure evolves. It starts with need, it escalates into moral judgment. I tried setting boundaries politely. "Can you show me the bills so I can budget properly?" She responded with a laughing emoji. "What, you don't trust me now?" It wasn't a question, it was a trap. Because if I insisted, I was accusing her. If I backed off, I kept paying. I backed off. The amounts increased slowly. First, I covered utilities, then groceries, then she mentioned her anxiety about late credit card payments. I can't sleep at night. You wouldn't want your mother stressed because of you. Because of me. I transferred $2,000 that night. That was more than half my monthly income. The next week, I skipped lunch to save money, canceled a dentist appointment, delayed fixing my car's brakes. Meanwhile, she bought a new television. When I asked about it, she shrugged. It was on sale. You worry too much. Something inside me cracked then, not loudly, but quietly. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about entitlement. She'd stopped asking. Now she informed me. Your aunt's birthday dinner is Saturday. I already told them you'd cover it. My insurance premium is due. I'll send the amount. No can you, no would you, just assumption. That's when the forced financial support stopped feeling like generosity. It felt like contractual. But I never signed anything. One night, I visited her apartment unannounced. She seemed startled when I showed up. The place looked different. New rug, new dining set, fresh manicure. We sat at the kitchen table. I finally asked the question I'd been avoiding. Mom, how much debt are you actually in? She stiffened. That's not your concern. It kind of is if I'm paying for it. Her eyes hardened in a way I hadn't seen before. You think you're better than me now? There it was again. Not discussion, not explanation, deflection. Gaslighting wrapped in parent pressure. I drove home shaking because for the first time I considered something unthinkable. What if she wasn't struggling? What if she was comfortable because I was uncomfortable? That thought terrified me, but it also gave me clarity. Every powerful revenge story has a moment when the victim stops denying reality. Mine was realizing this might never end, unless I ended it. I didn't confront her again right away. I didn't argue, I didn't explode. Instead, I opened a new savings account she didn't know about, and for the first time in years, I didn't transfer money the day she asked. I waited. Her message came within hours. Did you forget something? No, I hadn't forgotten. I was just finally remembering myself. The first time I didn't send the money immediately, she called me 12 times. 12. By the third missed call, my chest was tight. By the sixth, I felt like I was doing something criminal. That's what years of parent pressure does. It rewires your sense of right and wrong. When I finally answered, she didn't say hello. Why haven't you sent it? No context, no question mark. I told you I need to slow down, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I can't keep doing this level of forced financial support. Silence, then a sharp inhale. So now you're abandoning me. I closed my eyes. I'm not abandoning you. I just need boundaries. She laughed, short and cold. Boundaries? You sound like those therapists on the internet. I sacrificed my life for you, and now you're throwing buzzwords at me? There it was again, the narrative of sacrifice, the moral debt I could never repay. I've sent you over $30,000 in the past year, I said quietly. I need to understand where it's going. That's when her tone changed. How dare you audit your own mother? Audit. Not discuss, not clarify. Audit. Like I was attacking her. She hung up on me. The next morning, I woke up to a Facebook post. She hadn't named me directly, but she didn't need to. Some children forget who fed them when they were helpless. Karma sees everything. The comments poured in. You deserve better. Kids these days are so ungrateful. You did your best. My stomach dropped. This wasn't private anymore. This was public shame. That was the moment I realized something chilling. She wasn't afraid of losing my money. She was afraid of losing control. And when control slips, some people escalate. A week later, the real breaking point came. I received a notification from my bank, a new credit inquiry, in my name. I froze. I hadn't applied for anything. I called the bank immediately. There was a recently opened store credit card, approved, maxed out. The billing address? My mother's apartment. The room felt like it was tilting. I drove there without calling. She answered the door in a silk robe, completely calm. "Why are you here?" I held up my phone. "Did you open a credit card in my name?" She didn't even flinch. "I needed flexibility. You weren't sending money fast enough." My ears rang. "That's fraud." "Don't be dramatic," she snapped. "It's family." Family. As if that erased legality, as if that justified forced financial support without consent. "I was going to pay it back," she added dismissively. "With what income?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed. "You're overreacting." Overreacting. That word landed heavier than anything else, because in that moment, something inside me finally broke. Not my patience, not my anger, my illusion. This wasn't about helping a struggling parent. This wasn't temporary forced financial support. This was exploitation wrapped in parent pressure, protected by guilt, and she felt entitled to it. I stood there staring at the woman who raised me and realized I didn't recognize her. Or maybe I finally did. I walked out without another word. In the car, I sat in silence for a full 5 minutes. No tears, no screaming, just clarity. Every revenge story has a point of no return. This was mine. Not because she took my money, but because she took my name. And that's when I decided something dangerous. Not loud, not reckless, but irreversible. I was done playing the obedient daughter, and she had no idea what that meant yet. I didn't call the police that night. I didn't threaten her. I didn't post anything online. I did something far more unsettling. I went quiet. The next morning, I filed a fraud report with my bank. Calm voice, clear facts, no emotion. They froze the account immediately and launched an investigation. Then I contacted the credit bureau and placed a lock on my credit file. If she wanted to continue this pattern of forced financial support, she'd have to do it without my identity. For the first time in years, I felt steady. 3 days later, she called. Her voice was sugar sweet. "Sweetheart, something weird happened with the store card. It says it's under review." "I know," I said evenly. Pause. "You reported it?" I protected myself. The silence stretched longer this time. "That's extreme," she said finally. "You're acting like I'm a criminal." I didn't respond to that, because the truth didn't require debate. Then came the escalation. "You realize if that charge is reversed, I'll be in trouble, right?" "With who?" "With collections, with legal stuff. I can't handle that stress." There it was again, the familiar rhythm of parent pressure. Redirect, guilt, fear. But something had shifted inside me. "I can't handle debt in my name," I replied. Her tone sharpened. "So you're choosing money over your mother?" No, I was choosing sanity. Over the next few weeks, I made strategic moves. I canceled all automatic transfers, changed my passwords, removed her as an emergency contact. I also started documenting everything: texts, voicemails, screenshots. Not for revenge in the dramatic sense, for protection. Because the most effective revenge story isn't about screaming, it's about leverage. She began texting relatives. My aunt called me. "Your mom says you've cut her off financially. She's really struggling." I inhaled slowly. I've supported her for years. I just can't continue forced financial support with transparency. That word spread fast. Transparency. It's hard to argue against. Soon, whispers started circulating. How much was she sending? Wait, the credit card was in her name? My mother hated losing narrative control, and that's when the cracks became visible. One evening, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked smaller somehow, angrier. "You embarrassed me." "I protected myself." "You are ruining my reputation." I held her gaze. "You opened debt in my name." She scoffed. It was temporary. You didn't ask. She stepped closer. I am your mother. I shouldn't have to ask. There it was. Not desperation, entitlement. The raw core of years of forced financial support built on unspoken obligation. I felt a strange calm wash over me, because in that moment I understood something powerful. She truly believed I owed her unlimited access, and that belief was her weakness. So I did the one thing she never expected. I offered her a solution. I'll help you meet with a financial counselor. We can set up a repayment plan for your debts, but I'm not funding your lifestyle anymore. She stared at me like I'd betrayed her. I don't need counseling. I need my daughter. No, I corrected gently. You need accountability. That word hit harder than any accusation. She left without another word, and for the first time in years, my bank account stayed untouched at the end of the month. No emergency, no urgent transfer, no forced financial support. Just silence. But silence, I was learning, is where karma begins to grow, and my revenge story wasn't explosive, it was patient. And patience, unlike guilt, compounds. The silence lasted 12 days. That's how long it took before the first crack appeared. I got a call from my aunt again, but this time her tone was different. Your mom asked if she could stay with me for a few weeks, she said carefully. She mentioned some financial complications. Complications. I almost laughed. When you build your life on forced financial support, you forget what stability feels like without it. I hope she figures it out, I replied calmly, and for once, I didn't feel guilty. A week later, I received an official update from the bank. The fraudulent account had been fully reversed. The debt was removed from my credit history. An internal investigation confirmed identity misuse. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I stared at the email for a long time. This was the crossroads in every revenge story. The moment where anger tempts you to burn everything down. But this wasn't about destruction. It was about correction. I declined to pursue criminal charges. Instead, I requested formal documentation confirming the account was fraudulently opened without my consent. Paper trails matter, especially when someone relies on parent pressure as their main defense. Then came the shift I didn't expect. Relatives began asking her questions, not aggressive ones, just factual ones. How much was she giving you monthly? Why was the card in her name? Why didn't you tell us it was that serious? She wasn't prepared for scrutiny, because her entire system depended on privacy and guilt. Without secrecy, forced financial support looks less like devotion and more like dependency. One evening, she finally called me, not yelling, not accusing, tired. They're treating me like I did something wrong. I let the silence sit between us. Did you? I asked softly. She exhaled sharply. You don't understand what it's like to be alone. I almost broke then, because that was the first honest thing she'd said in years. Underneath the entitlement, beneath the manipulation, there was fear. Fear of aging, fear of irrelevance, fear of losing control. But fear doesn't justify exploitation, and loneliness doesn't excuse forced financial support without consent. I'm not your retirement plan, I said gently. I'm your daughter. She didn't respond. 2 weeks later, I heard she'd started part-time work at a local boutique. It wasn't glamorous, but it was income, and more importantly, it was hers. The spa trips stopped. The expensive dinners disappeared from her social media. Reality had entered the room. That's the quiet power of a patient revenge story. You don't attack, you remove the safety net, and gravity does the rest. The final turn came unexpectedly. She asked to meet for coffee, neutral territory. When she arrived, she looked different, less polished, more human. She said, "I shouldn't have opened that card," flatly. No excuses, no justifications, just truth. "I got used to the help," she continued. "It didn't feel like forced financial support. It felt like what I deserved." There it was. Deserved. I studied her face. For years, I thought saying no made me a bad daughter, but saying yes was making me resent you. Her eyes softened, not dramatically, not theatrically, just aware. For the first time, there was no parent pressure in the air, only consequence. And consequence, unlike revenge, doesn't shout, it teaches. She wasn't ruined, she wasn't arrested, she wasn't publicly destroyed. She was simply required to stand on her own, and somehow that felt like justice. But the story wasn't over yet, because karma. 3 months passed before I saw the full impact. Not dramatic, not explosive, just real. My savings account had grown for the first time in years. I paid off my car, I booked a small weekend trip to Portland, my first vacation without checking my bank balance every hour. Freedom feels quiet at first, then addictive. My mom's life, on the other hand, had adjusted to reality. The boutique job turned into steady part-time hours. She downsized to a smaller apartment, canceled unnecessary subscriptions. No more luxury posts online. No more subtle digs about ungrateful children. When people asked how she was doing, she said something new. "I'm managing." That word mattered. Managing meant ownership. Managing meant no more forced financial support. But karma truly struck one evening when she called, not for money, not for rescue, for advice. "I'm meeting with a financial advisor tomorrow. I don't really understand interest rates." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had been her silent credit line. Now she was learning what money actually costs. We talked for 20 minutes about budgeting basics, emergency funds, debt snowball methods, income to expense ratios. No manipulation, no parent pressure, just information. When we hung up, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel angry anymore. That was the real payoff in my revenge story. Not her struggle, not her embarrassment, my peace. A month later, my aunt hosted a family barbecue, the first one since everything happened. I almost didn't go. Old habits die hard, but I went anyway. My mom greeted me at the door. There was an awkward beat. Then she said quietly, "Thank you for not pressing charges." It wasn't dramatic, but it was acknowledgement. "I didn't want to ruin you," I replied. "I just needed it to stop." She nodded. "I know." And for the first time in years, there was no invisible invoice hanging between us. Later that afternoon, one of my cousins pulled me aside. "I heard you stopped helping your mom financially. That must have been hard." It was, I admitted, but forced financial support isn't love, it's control. Saying it out loud felt powerful, because it was true. When help becomes obligation, when generosity becomes entitlement, when family becomes financial leverage, that's not support. That's dependency disguised as devotion. And dependency collapses the moment you remove access. The real karma wasn't punishment, it was exposure. Exposure of the pattern, exposure of the entitlement, exposure of how parent pressure can quietly erode your boundaries until you forget you even had any. She had to rebuild her life, and I had to rebuild my self-worth. Both were uncomfortable. Both were necessary. One evening, months later, she surprised me. "I'm proud of you," she said during a phone call. It caught me off guard. "For what?" "For standing your ground," she said. "I hated it, but you were right." Those words healed more than any apology could. Because my revenge story didn't end with her downfall, it ended with recalibration. She didn't lose everything. She lost access to my automatic compliance.
and that changed everything. Karma didn't destroy her, it forced her to grow, and it reminded me that boundaries aren't betrayal, they're self-respect. But healing was still unfolding, and that part mattered just as much as the revenge.
Healing didn't happen the day she apologized. It happened in small, almost invisible shifts. The first month I didn't send money, I kept checking my phone, half expecting a crisis, an emergency, a guilt-soaked paragraph loaded with parent pressure. It never came. Instead, something else did. Space. I started therapy. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't trust my own instincts anymore. Years of forced financial support had trained me to override discomfort. If I felt uneasy, I told myself I was selfish. If I felt resentful, I told myself I was ungrateful. My therapist said something that changed everything. Helping someone under emotional coercion isn't generosity, it's survival. That sentence rewired me, because my entire identity had been built around being the good daughter, the dependable one, the responsible one, the one who absorbed pressure without complaint. But good daughters don't bankrupt themselves to keep a parent comfortable. They love, they care, they set limits. Our relationship didn't magically transform. There were awkward moments, conversations where she almost slipped back into old patterns. You know, if you ever felt like helping a little extra this month, and I'd gently say, I can't. No explanation, no defense, just clarity. At first, she bristled. Then she adjusted. Because parent pressure only works when the target participates, and I had stopped participating. What surprised me most was how my own life expanded once the constant drain stopped. I enrolled in a professional certification program I'd postponed for years. I rebuilt my emergency fund. I started dating without secretly calculating how much money I might need to transfer that week. Financial freedom is emotional freedom. When you're not trapped in forced financial support, your future feels larger, more possible. One evening, months later, my mom and I had a conversation that felt different. Not tense, not strategic. Real. I didn't realize how much I depended on you, she admitted. It started as help, and then it felt normal. That's how it felt to me too, like I couldn't step back without being a villain. She sighed. I was scared, getting older, not having enough. That vulnerability mattered, because fear had been hiding behind control, and I could empathize with fear. I just couldn't subsidize it anymore. This revenge story wasn't about humiliating her. It wasn't about cutting her off forever. It was about shifting the dynamic, from obligation to choice. Now, if I treat her to dinner, it's because I want to. If I buy her a birthday gift, it's joyful, not transactional. There's no invisible spreadsheet in my head anymore, and she knows there's a line she can't cross. The biggest lesson? Love without boundaries breeds resentment. Boundaries without love breed distance. But boundaries with love, they create respect. I used to think saying no meant losing my mother. Instead, it forced both of us to grow up. And that's the part people don't talk about in every revenge story. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is refusing to keep playing your assigned role. I wasn't her wallet. I wasn't her safety net. I wasn't her emergency fund. I was her daughter. And once I believed that, truly believed it, everything changed. There's only one question left. What would I do differently if I could go back? If I could go back, I wouldn't wait so long to speak up. That's the honest answer. I wouldn't wait until forced financial support drained my savings. I wouldn't wait until my credit was at risk. I wouldn't wait until resentment replaced affection. Because the longer you tolerate something that feels wrong, the harder it becomes to recognize your own voice. For years, I thought strength meant endurance. Endure the comments, endure the guilt, endure the subtle parent pressure that made every no feel like betrayal. But strength isn't silent suffering. Strength is clarity. It's saying, I love you, but not at the cost of myself. That sentence took me years to learn, and maybe that's why this revenge story doesn't feel bitter when I look back on it. It feels instructive. My mom and I still talk, not every day, not about money, sometimes about work, sometimes about recipes, sometimes about nothing important at all. The dynamic has changed. There's no automatic expectation anymore. If she mentions a bill, it's informational, not a request. If I offer help, it's specific and limited. Healthy. And that word healthy is something we never had before. I've had friends ask me if I regret not pressing charges, if I regret not going further. The truth? No. Because revenge to me wasn't about punishment, it was about correction. It was about breaking a cycle of forced financial support disguised as love. It was about dismantling years of parent pressure that taught me my value was measured in dollars. And karma didn't need fireworks. Karma needed exposure. Once the truth was visible, to family, to her, and to me, the system collapsed on its own. Sometimes I think about how easily this could happen to anyone. A hardworking daughter, a struggling parent, good intentions, and then slowly boundaries blur. Help becomes obligation. Obligation becomes entitlement. Entitlement becomes expectation. That's how stories like mine begin, not with cruelty, with small compromises. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, the guilt, the pressure, the quiet resentment, I want you to know something I wish someone had told me sooner. You are allowed to love someone without financing their life. You are allowed to say no without being heartless. And you are allowed to step out of a system that was built on silent obligation. That was the real ending of my revenge story. Not her apology, not the job she took, not the credit card investigation. The real ending was me reclaiming choice. Because once support becomes voluntary, it becomes love again. So now I'll leave you with this. If someone you loved expected ongoing financial help, not asked but assumed, would you keep paying to keep the peace, or would you risk conflict to keep your self-respect? What would you have done if you were in my place?